Sarah Collins clutched her phone with trembling fingers, the hospital bracelet still wrapped around her wrist. The doctor's words echoed in her mind. Stage 4 spread to the lymph nodes, as she stared at the threatening note taped to her front door. Final warning: pay what you owe by Friday or we're taking the house. No more extensions. Tears blurred her vision as she thought of her 8-year-old daughter Emma sleeping at her sister's house, blissfully unaware that they might soon be homeless. Sarah had exhausted every option. The medical bills had drained her savings, her credit was maxed out, and now with the cancer spreading rapidly, she couldn't even work. In desperation, she dialed the number scrawled on a napkin that a nurse had slipped her. "If you ever need help no one else can give," the nurse had whispered. A gruff voice answered. "Wolf speaking. My name is Sarah Collins," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm a single mom with stage 4 cancer. They're going to take my home. My daughter will have nowhere to go when I'm gone. Please, I have no one else to turn to." There was a long pause, then, "Be home tomorrow at noon. We'll be there." What Sarah didn't know was that within hours, her plea would reach the ears of every Pagans MC chapter on the East Coast, setting in motion an army of leather-clad guardians unlike anything her quiet suburban neighborhood had ever seen. Would you like to witness what happens when 2,000 bikers stand against the darkest kind of predators? Subscribe now to follow this incredible true story. The morning sun cast long shadows across Sarah Collins's modest 2-bedroom home in Maple Creek, Pennsylvania. The house needed a fresh coat of paint, and the front steps sagged slightly, but the flower beds, now overgrown, showed the care that had once been lavished on this small piece of the American dream. Sarah sat at her kitchen table, her once healthy frame now gaunt, cheekbones sharp beneath pale skin. At 34, she had the weary eyes of someone who had seen too much hardship in too little time. Her honey-blonde hair, once thick and lustrous, was growing back in wispy patches after her 3rd round of chemotherapy. The divorce had come first, 3 years ago, when Emma was just 5. Sarah's ex-husband had walked out for his 23-year-old secretary, leaving her with a mortgage and a kindergartner. She had managed, though, picking up extra shifts as a nurse at Mercy General, maintaining the home her parents had helped her buy, creating a stable life for Emma. Then came the diagnosis. Breast cancer, already advanced by the time they caught it, the medical leave that turned permanent, the insurance that covered less than half, the predatory loans from Horizon Financial that had seemed like a lifeline at first. Sarah sipped her lukewarm tea, wincing at the metallic taste the chemo left in her mouth, and checked the time. 11:45. She wasn't sure what to expect from this wolf person. The nurse, Darlene, had been vague, only saying that he had helped her brother when no one else would. A motorcycle rumbled in the distance, then another and another. The sound grew from a murmur to a thunderous roar that vibrated the windows. Sarah rose shakily from her chair and moved to the living room window, pulling back the curtain. What she saw made her breath catch. Motorcycles lined her street as far as she could see, gleaming machines in black, chrome, and midnight blue. Their riders were dismounting now, men and women in leather vests with patches showing a pagan deity that gave the club its name. Some wore bandanas, others had beards streaked with grey. All moved with the unmistakable confidence of people accustomed to commanding respect. At their center walked a mountain of a man, at least 6'5", with shoulders that stretched his leather vest to its limits. His salt and pepper beard was neatly trimmed, contrasting with the full-sleeve tattoos visible on his massive arms. This had to be Wolf. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened her front door. The sound of 2,000 motorcycles had drawn her neighbors outside, who now watched from their porches with expressions ranging from curiosity to alarm. Wolf approached the steps, removing his sunglasses to reveal eyes that were surprisingly gentle in his weathered face. "Ms. Collins." His voice was deep but quiet. Sarah nodded, suddenly conscious of her too thin body in sweatpants and a faded T-shirt. I'm Sarah. Thank you for coming, but I wasn't expecting an army. Wolf's mouth curved in a slight smile. Word travels fast in our family. May we come in? Just me and my officers. The others will stay outside. Sarah stepped back, allowing Wolf and 4 others to enter her small living room. They moved carefully, these large men in her space, like bears trying not to break delicate things. This is Diesel, our vice president, Wolf said, indicating a shorter, stocky man with a shaved head. Hawk, our treasurer. Doc, our sergeant-at-arms. And Red, our intelligence officer. Red was the only woman among them, with fiery hair streaked with silver and knowing eyes that missed nothing as she scanned Sarah's living room, noting the pill bottles on the side table, the past-due notices stacked on the desk, the school photos of Emma. Please sit, Sarah gestured to her couch and armchairs, which suddenly seemed too small for her visitors. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? We're fine, Ms. Collins, Wolf said as they arranged themselves around the room. Darlene gave us the outline of your situation, but we'd like to hear it from you. Sarah sank into her armchair, exhaustion washing over her. I don't even know where to start. The beginning's usually best, Doc said kindly. Despite his intimidating title, he had the soft-spoken manner of someone used to calming, frightened people. Sarah took a deep breath and began. She told them about the divorce, the cancer diagnosis 13 months ago, how she'd burned through her savings during the first rounds of treatment, how the hospital bills kept coming even as her income stopped, how Horizon Financial had offered what seemed like a reasonable loan against her home equity. But then I couldn't make the payments, she explained, shame coloring her voice. Each time I missed one, they added fees, increased the interest. They've been threatening foreclosure for months, but yesterday their representative came by personally. What's this representative's name? Red asked, her pen poised over a small notebook. James Mercer. He's their collections specialist, whatever that means. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, remembering his cold eyes as he'd looked around her home like he was already measuring for new furniture. He said no more extensions. They're filing on Friday if I don't pay the full amount plus penalties. How much? Hawk asked quietly. Sarah named a figure that made her voice break. I can't possibly pay it. Not now, not ever with these medical bills. I've tried everything. Payment plans, assistance programs, even GoFundMe. But my treatment costs thousands every month, and without work. She trailed off, wiping a tear that had escaped despite her best efforts. And your prognosis? Wolf asked gently. Sarah met his gaze directly. 6 months, maybe a year with the new treatment they want to try, but that costs even more. Your little girl, Red said, nodding toward a photo of Emma, gap-toothed and beaming in her soccer uniform. Where is she now? With my sister in Pittsburgh. Jennifer's been amazing, taking Emma on my worst chemo days. But she lives in a 1-bedroom apartment with 2 jobs. She can't take her permanently. Sarah's voice faltered. Emma doesn't know how bad things are. I've tried to protect her, but that's what mothers do, Wolf said, his voice suddenly distant, as if remembering something painful. The room fell silent for a moment. Finally, Wolf leaned forward, his massive hands clasped between his knees. Miss Collins, I need to ask you something, and I need the absolute truth. Sarah nodded, her throat tight. Is there anything illegal about your situation? Anything that might cause problems for my people if we get involved? No, Sarah said firmly. I've never missed a mortgage payment until the cancer. I've never been in trouble with the law. I'm just a mother trying to give my daughter a home for however long I have left. Wolf studied her for a long moment, then nodded, apparently satisfied with what he saw in her eyes. Horizon Financial, he mused. We've heard that name before, haven't we, Red? The red-headed woman nodded grimly. 3 cases in the last year. Predatory lending targeting vulnerable people. They operate just on the edge of legality. Wolf turned back to Sarah. Here's what's going to happen. The Pagans MC is going to stand with you. Not just my chapter. All of us. He gestured toward the window. where leather-clad figures still lined the street. We protect our own, and now that includes you and Emma. If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. Sarah stared at him in disbelief. But why? You don't even know me. Wolf's expression darkened, a glimpse of the intimidating force he could be. Because 20 years ago, my sister was where you are now. Single mum, sick, desperate. Nobody stood up for her. By the time I got out of the service and found her, she was gone. Her daughter, my niece, was in the system. His voice grew quiet. I never found her. The room was silent except for the distant rumble of motorcycles outside. This isn't charity, Ms. Collins, Doc added softly. This is justice. The strong protecting those who can't protect themselves. It's what we do. Diesel, who had been silent until now, spoke up. First things first. We need to secure this property and get some legal eyes on your paperwork with Horizon. Red nodded, already typing on her phone. I'm calling Spider. He'll be here in an hour. Spider's our attorney, Wolf explained to Sarah's questioning look. Former prosecutor who rides with us now. He'll review everything, see what options we have legally. And if legal options don't work? Sarah asked hesitantly. Wolf's smile didn't reach his eyes. We have other methods, but let's try the law first. Outside, the sound of more motorcycles approaching filled the air. Wolf glanced out the window. That'll be the Philly chapter. They made good time. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the sudden force that had entered her life, these strangers with hard exteriors and unexpected kindness. I don't know how to thank you. You already have, Wolf said simply. You trusted us with your daughter's future. There's no greater honor for the Pagans. By evening, Sarah's modest home had become the command center for what Red jokingly called Operation Guardian Angel. Spider, a lean man with wire-rimmed glasses that contrasted with his full-sleeve tattoos, had spread Sarah's financial documents across her dining table. It's predatory, all right, he confirmed, pointing to clauses in the fine print. Variable interest that can triple after missed payments, accelerated penalties, and this clause here essentially waives your right to standard foreclosure protections. Is it legal? Wolf asked, standing behind Spider. Legal enough that they haven't been shut down yet, Spider admitted. But there are grounds to challenge it. The terms are unconscionable, especially given Ms. Collins' medical situation. Outside, the Pagans had established a rotation, with members taking shifts to ensure the property was guarded around the clock. Others had begun tackling the neglected yard work and minor home repairs that Sarah had been unable to manage during her illness. Neighbors who had initially watched with suspicion were now bringing over casseroles and introducing themselves. The presence of 2,000 bikers in their suburban neighborhood had created an impromptu community gathering unlike anything Maple Creek had seen before. "Mom! Mom!" A little girl's voice cut through the evening air as a car pulled into the driveway. Sarah rose quickly, moving to the front door. Emma Collins bounded up the walkway, her blonde ponytail bouncing, blue eyes wide with excitement. "Mom, there are like 1,000,000 motorcycles on our street, and Aunt Jen said—" She stopped short at the sight of Wolf filling the doorway behind her mother. "Emma, honey," Sarah said, kneeling despite the pain it caused her. "These are some new friends who are helping us out for a while. This is Mr. Wolf." Emma studied the giant man with the frank curiosity of childhood. "Your name is really Wolf? That's so cool. Like a superhero name." Wolf's weathered face creased in a genuine smile. "Something like that, little lady." Jennifer, Sarah's sister, approached more cautiously, her eyes moving from the bikers to Sarah with clear concern. "It's okay, Jen," Sarah assured her. "They're here to help with the Horizon situation." Jennifer raised an eyebrow but nodded. She'd been with Sarah through enough hardship to trust her judgment. "Well, I brought Emma's things. She has school tomorrow, but I wasn't sure if you wanted—" "I want to stay with Mom," Emma declared, wrapping her arms around Sarah's waist, "and see all the motorcycles." "Of course you'll stay, sweetheart," Sarah said, stroking her daughter's hair. "Everything's going to be fine now." Later, after Emma was asleep in her room and Jennifer had reluctantly left with promises to return tomorrow, Sarah sat on her porch swing with Wolf and Red. The night air was cool, filled with the murmur of conversations from pagans who had set up camp in her yard and along the street. "I still don't understand the scale of this," Sarah admitted. "Why would all these people, hundreds of miles away, drop everything to help someone they've never met?" Red exchanged a glance with Wolf before answering. "The pagans have a code. When one of us puts out a call for help, we answer. No questions asked. Wolf here has saved a lot of brothers over the years. When he called, they didn't hesitate." "But I'm not one of you," Sarah persisted. Wolf's deep voice rumbled in the darkness. "You are now, Sarah. You and Emma both. If you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep?" Dawn broke over Maple Creek with the scent of coffee and bacon filling the air. The Pagans Women's Auxiliary had arrived overnight, setting up field kitchens to feed the hundreds of bikers who had remained. Many had returned to their chapters with promises to rotate back as needed, ensuring a constant presence. Sarah awoke to find Emma already dressed and chattering excitedly with a group of female riders who were helping her make friendship bracelets at the kitchen table. "Mom, Valkyrie showed me how to make the twisted pattern. Can I bring some to school to show Lily and Madison?" Sarah smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm, nodding gratefully to the tattooed woman who had introduced Emma to the craft. For the first time in months, Emma looked carefree, unburdened by the heavy atmosphere of illness and worry that had pervaded their home. As Sarah accepted a cup of coffee from one of the women, Spider entered, his expression serious. "We have a situation," he said quietly. "Horizon Financial just filed for emergency foreclosure. They're asking the court for immediate possession." Sarah's hand trembled, coffee sloshing over the rim of her mug. "How? You said we had until Friday." "They're claiming they have reason to believe the property is being used for illegal activities," Spider explained, anger evident in his controlled tone. "They've submitted photos of the pagans on your property as evidence of gang activity." "That's ridiculous," Sarah exclaimed, then lowered her voice as Emma looked up curiously. "Can they do that?" "They can try," Spider said grimly. "I've already filed a counter-motion and requested a hearing, but the judge assigned to the case, Judge Harrison, has a reputation for being business-friendly." Wolf had entered during this conversation, his massive frame filling the doorway. "When's the hearing?" "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. "We'll be there," Wolf stated simply. "Not all of you," Spider cautioned. "A courtroom full of pagans won't help our case. Sarah, yourself, and a few others representing the club. We need to look respectable." Wolf nodded reluctantly. "Red, Diesel, Doc, and myself, in proper attire. Meanwhile," Spider continued, "I've been digging into Horizon's practices. They've done this before, accelerated foreclosures against vulnerable homeowners, especially those with medical issues or recent job losses. They target people who don't have the resources to fight back." "But why?" Sarah asked. "My house isn't worth that much." Red, who had been listening from the kitchen doorway, stepped forward. "It's not about your house specifically. It's about the land. Maple Creek is being rezoned for commercial development. Properties in this neighborhood are being bought up by shell companies, all leading back to a development corporation called Pinnacle Enterprises." "And let me guess," Wolf growled. "Horizon Financial and Pinnacle are connected." Red nodded. "Same parent company, different names to hide the relationship. They loan to people they think will default, then foreclose and flip the properties to developers at a massive profit." Sarah felt sick. "So they never expected me to be able to pay. They wanted me to fail." "Exactly," Spider confirmed. "And they've been getting away with it for years because no one has had the resources to challenge them properly." Wolf's expression darkened. "Until now." As the day progressed, more information emerged about Horizon Financial's practices. Red and Spider coordinated with pagans from other chapters who had legal or financial backgrounds, building a case against the company. Meanwhile, Local news vans had begun arriving, drawn by the unusual sight of hundreds of motorcycles in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Wolf designated Doc as their spokesperson, his calm, articulate manner making him the perfect representative to explain their presence. "We're here to support a community member in need," Doc told a reporter from Channel 4 News, careful to keep Sarah and Emma out of the camera's view. The Pagans Motorcycle Club has a long history of community service and support for veterans and families facing medical crises. By mid-afternoon, the story had gone viral. In the Pagans, Protect was trending on social media, with thousands of supportive messages flooding in from around the country. Other motorcycle clubs sent delegations of support, setting aside territorial concerns in solidarity with Sarah's cause. Emma returned from school bubbling with excitement. "Mom, everyone was talking about the bikers. Madison says her dad says you're like a celebrity now." Sarah managed a smile, though her stomach churned with anxiety about the next day's hearing. "It's quite something, isn't it, sweetie?" As evening fell, Wolf found Sarah sitting alone on the back porch steps, away from the activity at the front of the house. "Overwhelming, isn't it?" he asked, lowering himself carefully to sit beside her. Sarah nodded, pulling her cardigan tighter around her thin shoulders. "I never wanted any of this attention. I just wanted to keep a home for Emma." "Sometimes the fight finds us whether we want it or not," Wolf said quietly. "The question is, do we stand or run?" "I'm tired of running," Sarah admitted. "Tired of being scared all the time. Tired of wondering if each day with Emma might be my last." Wolf was silent for a long moment, staring out at the darkening yard. "When my sister got sick, she tried to handle everything alone, proud like you. By the time I found out, it was too late." His voice grew rough. "I promised myself I'd never let that happen to another family if I could help it." "Your niece," Sarah said hesitantly. "Did you ever find her?" Wolf shook his head. "She would be about your age now. The system lost track of her after multiple foster placements. I still search sometimes, but—" He trailed off, then straightened his shoulders. "Tomorrow is about you and Emma. We're going to show Horizon Financial what happens when they pick on the wrong family. If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments." The county courthouse was an imposing brick building, with white columns and marble steps that Sarah had passed countless times but never entered. Now, dressed in the most professional outfit her wasted frame could still wear, she climbed those steps flanked by Wolf, Red, Diesel and Doc, all of whom had exchanged their leather for respectable business attire. Spider led their small procession, carrying a briefcase packed with documents and precedents. Behind them, lining the street as far as the eye could see, stood hundreds of pagans in their colors, a silent wall of support. Inside the courtroom, representatives from Horizon Financial already waited. 3 men in expensive suits with the polished appearance of people accustomed to winning. Their lead attorney, a silver-haired man with cold eyes, didn't bother to hide his smirk as he saw Sarah's small group. "All rise for the Honorable Judge William Harrison," the bailiff called. Judge Harrison was in his 60s, with thinning hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. He surveyed the courtroom with an expression of mild irritation before taking his seat. "Case number 27584, Horizon Financial versus Collins. Emergency petition for immediate possession." He peered over his glasses. "I see we have quite the crowd today. Let's keep this orderly. Counsel for the petitioner, you may begin." Horizon's attorney rose smoothly. "Thank you, Your Honor. I'm Thomas Whitfield, representing Horizon Financial. We're seeking immediate possession of the property at 1482 Maple Street due to material breach of contract by the respondent, Sarah Collins." He went on to detail Sarah's missed payments, the accrued penalties, and the disturbing development of a known motorcycle gang occupying the property. "Your Honor, we have photographic evidence of members of the Pagans Motorcycle Club, a group with documented criminal activities, occupying Ms. Collins' property, We believe the property is now being used for illegal purposes, creating an urgent situation requiring immediate action." Judge Harrison nodded thoughtfully. "Counsel for the respondent." Spider stood. "Matthew Spencer, representing Sarah Collins, Your Honor. We categorically deny the allegations of illegal activity and challenge both the validity of the underlying loan agreement and the petitioner's right to accelerated foreclosure." On what grounds?" the judge asked, sounding skeptical. "Unconscionable contract terms, predatory lending practices targeting a vulnerable individual with a terminal illness, and evidence of a systematic pattern of such behavior by Horizon Financial, specifically targeting properties in areas slated for redevelopment." Judge Harrison frowned. "Those are serious allegations, Mr. Spencer." "Yes, they are, Your Honor, and we're prepared to prove each one." Spider approached the bench, handing up a thick folder. "This contains affidavits from 17 other homeowners who have experienced identical practices from Horizon, all within mapped redevelopment zones. It also contains documentation linking Horizon Financial to Pinnacle Enterprises through their parent company, Cromwell Holdings." The judge's eyebrows rose as he skimmed the documents. Whitfield shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "As for the presence of the Pagans Motorcycle Club," Spider continued, "they are at Ms. Collins' property at her invitation, providing security and support during her illness. There is no evidence of any illegal activity, and in fact, their presence has reduced crime in the neighborhood, as documented by local police reports from the past 3 days. Sarah watched Judge Harrison's face, trying to read his reaction. His expression remained neutral as Spider outlined their case, methodically dismantling Horizon's claims. "Furthermore, Your Honor," Spider concluded, "we have initiated a countersuit against Horizon Financial for predatory lending, fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress upon a terminal cancer patient." This caused a stir in the courtroom. Whitfield leaped to his feet. "Your Honor, this is an outrageous attempt to distract from the simple fact that Ms. Collins has defaulted on her loan obligations." Judge Harrison raised a hand for silence. "Mr. Whitfield, I find the documentation presented by the respondent's counsel quite concerning. I'm also troubled by the timing of this emergency petition, which appears to have been filed specifically in response to Ms. Collins finding representation." He turned to Sarah. "Ms. Collins, would you approach the bench, please?" Sarah rose on shaking legs. Wolf moved as if to support her, but she shook her head slightly. This was something she needed to do alone. "Ms. Collins," Judge Harrison said quietly once she stood before him, his tone gentler than before, "I see from the medical documentation that your situation is quite serious. I'm sorry for your illness." "Thank you, Your Honor," Sarah replied. "May I ask why you invited the Pagans Motorcycle Club to your property? It's an unusual choice for protection." Sarah met his gaze directly. "When you're dying, Your Honor, you learn quickly who genuinely wants to help and who doesn't. The Pagans offered help without asking for anything in return. They've shown more humanity than the company that's trying to take my home before I'm even gone." The judge studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Collins. You may be seated." Judge Harrison removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose. "I've seen enough to determine that an emergency order is not warranted in this case. The foreclosure will proceed through normal channels, giving Ms. Collins' counsel adequate time to present their countersuit." Whitfield started to protest, but the judge cut him off. "Furthermore, I am issuing a stay on any foreclosure proceedings pending investigation of the allegations against Horizon Financial. Mr. Whitfield, I suggest you advise your client to review their practices carefully before returning to my courtroom." He banged his gavel. "Court is adjourned." The small victory felt enormous. As they exited the courthouse, the assembled pagans erupted in cheers. News cameras captured the moment. Sarah, frail but standing tall, flanked by her unlikely guardians, descending the courthouse steps. "This is just the beginning," Spider cautioned as they reached the street. "Horizon won't give up easily." They have too much invested in acquiring these properties. Neither will we, Wolf stated, his voice carrying to those nearby. Sarah and Emma are family now, and the Pagans protect their family. If you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep? Over the next weeks, Sarah's story captured national attention. News segments featured the unusual alliance between a dying mother and one of the country's largest motorcycle clubs. Motorcycle clubs from across the country sent representatives to Maple Creek in a show of solidarity. Pagans Protect evolved from a hashtag into a movement, with supporters organizing fundraisers for Sarah's medical bills and legal expenses. Through it all, the Pagans maintained their vigilant presence, rotating members to ensure Sarah's home was protected around the clock. Wolf stayed in Maple Creek, coordinating the operation from a small apartment rented nearby. Emma blossomed amid the attention, adopted as a mascot by the Pagans' Women's Auxiliary. They helped her with homework, taught her to braid leather, and made sure she never felt the weight of her mother's illness too heavily. For Sarah, each day became precious in a new way. Though her body continued to weaken, her spirit strengthened. The constant fear that had dominated her life since her diagnosis began to recede, replaced by a profound gratitude for the unexpected family that had emerged around her. One evening, as Sarah sat on her porch watching Emma play soccer in the front yard with several young Pagans, Wolf joined her. "Spider called," he said without preamble. "Horizon's parent company has reached out about a settlement." Sarah turned to him surprised. "Already? Spider said it could take months." "It turns out they don't like the publicity," Wolf said with grim satisfaction. "Or the class action that's forming with the other homeowners. 23 families have joined now." "What are they offering?" Sarah asked. "Loan forgiveness for everyone in the class action, compensation for emotional distress, and they'll cover your medical bills for the experimental treatment your doctor mentioned." Sarah's breath caught. "The immunotherapy? But that costs—" "They know exactly what it costs," Wolf interrupted gently. "And they know exactly what they stand to lose if this goes to trial." Hope, dangerous, fragile hope, flickered in Sarah's chest. The treatment her oncologist had mentioned was experimental but promising, with several complete remissions in cases like hers. The cost had made it an impossible dream. "There's a catch," Wolf continued. "They want a non-disclosure agreement. No one talks about the settlement or their practices." "Silence," Sarah murmured, watching Emma laugh as she kicked the soccer ball. "They want to buy our silence." Wolf nodded. Spider advised accepting. "It's a good offer, Sarah. Security for Emma. A chance at the treatment." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "And if I don't accept? If I want to fight them all the way?" Wolf's weathered face creased in a smile. "Then 2,000 Pagans will stand with you until the end. Whatever you decide." The weight of the decision settled on Sarah's shoulders. The practical choice was clear. Take the money, secure Emma's future, try the treatment. But something in her rebelled at the thought of Horizon continuing their practices elsewhere, targeting other vulnerable families. "I need to think," she said finally. "Of course," Wolf agreed, rising to leave her with her thoughts. "But Sarah, whatever you decide, we're not going anywhere." Later that night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah sat at her kitchen table with Red, whose background in financial analysis had made her an invaluable ally. "If I take the settlement," Sarah began, "what happens to the other families fighting Horizon?" Red considered the question. "The ones in the class action would get relief, but Horizon would continue operating. They'd be more careful, maybe change their name, but the practice would continue. And if I don't? If we take them to trial? Best case, the publicity forces regulatory changes, Horizon and companies like them face real consequences. Worst case, they drag it out for years, hoping you won't live to see the end." The brutal honesty was what Sarah needed. "And Emma, if I choose to fight and if you don't make it?" Red finished gently when Sarah couldn't. "Emma will never be alone. I promise you that." Sarah nodded, tears forming. "I need to talk to my sister." And my doctor. The next morning, Sarah called a meeting with Wolf, Spider, and the core group that had been with her since the beginning. "I've made my decision," she announced, her voice steadier than it had been in weeks. "I want to propose a counteroffer to Horizon. I'll sign their non-disclosure agreement about my specific case in exchange for the loan forgiveness and medical coverage." Spider nodded approvingly, but Sarah raised a hand to indicate she wasn't finished. "But I want the class action to continue for the other families, and I want Horizon to agree to a review of all their lending practices by an independent ethics committee." "They'll never agree to the ethics committee," Spider warned. "That's asking them to put their head in a noose." "Then we make it public that they refused," Sarah said simply. "We use the publicity to force their hand." Wolf's expression was a mixture of respect and concern. "You're choosing the harder path, Sarah. Are you sure?" "I'm dying, Wolf," Sarah said with the calm clarity of someone who had accepted her fate. "But I can choose what my life means. I want Emma to know I fought for what was right, not just what was easy." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. "Then that's what we'll do," Wolf finally said, his deep voice resolute. Together. The negotiations with Horizon were tense and protracted. Their initial rejection of Sarah's counteroffer was met with a coordinated social media campaign that brought their practices into the national spotlight. Investors began questioning Cromwell Holdings, their parent company. Regulatory agencies announced investigations. Finally, 3 months after the Pagans had first arrived in Maple Creek, Horizon capitulated. The settlement was everything Sarah had asked for: loan forgiveness, medical coverage, continued action for the other families, and the creation of an independent ethics committee to review their lending practices. The day the agreement was signed, Sarah sat in her oncologist's office, listening as he explained the immunotherapy treatment that would begin the following week. "I want to be very clear, Sarah," Dr. Patel said gently. "This is not a guaranteed cure. The success rate in cases like yours is about 30%. "Better odds than I had 3 months ago," Sarah replied with a small smile. "I'll take them." Outside the medical center, Wolf waited on his motorcycle, a custom machine that dwarfed the others in the parking lot. "All set?" he asked as Sarah approached. She nodded, climbing carefully onto the back of his bike. "Treatment starts next Monday." Wolf handed her a helmet emblazoned with the Pagans MC logo. "Emma's got soccer practice until 5. Thought you might want to take the scenic route home." As they roared down the highway, Sarah felt a freedom she had almost forgotten. The wind against her face, the powerful machine beneath her, the open road ahead. It was life distilled to its purest essence. Wolf took her to a bluff overlooking the valley where Maple Creek nestled among autumn trees. In the distance, Sarah could see her neighborhood, the small blue house that had nearly been taken from her, now a symbol of resistance and hope. "Whatever happens with the treatment," Wolf said as they stood looking out over the valley, "you've changed things, Sarah. Not just for yourself or for Emma, for all of us." "I couldn't have done it without the Pagans," Sarah replied, meaning it. Wolf shook his head. "We provided the muscle. You provided the heart." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "My sister would have been proud to know you." "I wish I could have met her," Sarah said softly. "Yeah," Wolf agreed, his voice distant. "Julie was something else. Fought to the end, just like you." Sarah looked at him sharply. "Julie? Was that her name?" Wolf nodded, confused by her sudden intensity. "Julie Collins. Why?" Sarah's hand went to her mouth, her legs suddenly unsteady. My maiden name is Blackwood. My mother's name was Julie Collins before she married my father." Wolf stared at her, disbelief etched on his weathered face. "That's not possible. Julie only had one child, a daughter named Sarah," she whispered. "Born July 17th. Given up for adoption when Julie became too sick to care for her." The world seemed to stop as they looked at each other, seeing for the first time the echoes of a shared history in their faces, the same determined jawline, the same blue-gray eyes. "Uncle Michael," Sarah breathed. the childhood name she had been told belonging to a long-lost relative. "My mother said you were overseas, that you didn't know." Wolf, Michael Blackwood, beneath the road name he'd carried for 20 years, reached out a trembling hand to touch her face, as if confirming she was real. "All this time," he said, his voice breaking, "all this time I was looking, and you were—" Words failed them both as the impossible truth settled between them. The connection they had felt from the beginning had not been random chance, but blood calling to blood, a promise made to a dying sister fulfilled in ways neither could have imagined. In that moment, on a bluff overlooking the town where Sarah's journey had nearly ended and was now beginning again, the circle closed. The 2,000 pagans who had answered a desperate woman's call had not just been protecting a stranger, they had been bringing their leader's niece home. And in Emma's face, Wolf now recognized his sister's smile, the family legacy continuing in ways that defied all odds. Whatever the treatment's outcome, Sarah was no longer alone. She had found not just protection, but belonging in the most unexpected place. As the sun began to set over Maple Creek, uncle and niece stood together in the gathering dusk, the wind carrying the distant sound of motorcycles, a sound that had once meant fear but now signified family, protection, and hope for whatever battles still lay ahead. Chapter 2. Blood and Brotherhood. The drive back to Sarah's home passed in a daze, both she and Wolf too overwhelmed to speak. The impossible coincidence, or perhaps fate, that had brought them together hung between them like a tangible thing. When they pulled into the driveway, Emma was already home, sitting on the porch steps with Valkyrie, who was helping her string beads for yet another bracelet. Emma looked up at the sound of Wolf's motorcycle, her face breaking into a smile. "Mom, did you tell him about the treatment?" Sarah nodded, struggling to find her voice as she dismounted carefully from the bike. "I did, sweetheart. It starts Monday." Emma bounced to her feet, rushing to hug her mother. "Doc said it's going to make you better. He promised." Sarah stroked her daughter's hair, meeting Wolf's eyes over Emma's head. "Emma, there's something else I need to tell you. Something important." She took a deep breath. "Wolf, Mr. Michael, is actually your great-uncle. My uncle, my mother's brother." Emma's eyes widened as she turned to look at the giant biker. "For real? Like for real?" Wolf knelt down to Emma's level, his massive frame somehow making the gesture even more poignant. "For real, little lady. I've been looking for your mum for a very long time." "But how didn't you know?" Emma asked, her 8-year-old mind trying to process this revelation. "It's complicated, sweetheart," Sarah said gently. "My mother, your grandmother, had to give me up for adoption when she got sick, like I am now. Uncle Michael was in the military overseas and didn't know until it was too late. So we're actually related to the pagans?" Emma asked, excitement building in her voice. Wolf chuckled. "To one pagan, at least. Me." Emma considered this for a moment, then threw her arms around Wolf's neck. "I knew it. I told Maddie at school that you guys were our real family, and she said that was stupid, but I was right." Wolf's arms closed carefully around the small girl, his eyes meeting Sarah's over Emma's shoulder. In that moment, something shifted, the tentative alliance solidifying into something unbreakable. Later that night, after Emma was asleep, Sarah and Wolf sat at her kitchen table, old photo albums spread between them. Sarah had retrieved them from storage, dusty boxes that contained the few mementos she had from her adoptive parents, who had died in a car accident when she was 25. "My adoptive mother told me a little about Julie before she passed," Sarah explained, turning pages filled with faded photographs. "That she was young and sick, that she wanted me to have a better life than she could give me. But there were so few details." Now Wolf ran a finger over a small black and white photo, a young woman with Sarah's eyes and Emma's smile. "This was Julie, your mother, my little sister." Sarah touched the image reverently. "She was beautiful. She was stubborn as hell," Wolf said with a sad laugh. "Smart, too. Was going to be a teacher before she got sick. Leukemia. Back then, the treatments were even harder than they are now. Did she suffer at the end? Sarah asked quietly. Wolf's expression darkened. She did. I was deployed when she gave you up. By the time I got back, she was in hospice. She made me promise to find you, to make sure you were okay. His voice roughened. I tried, Sarah. For years I tried, but the adoption records were sealed. The agency had gone out of business. I hit dead end after dead end. And then I called you out of the blue, Sarah marveled. What are the chances? I don't believe in chances anymore, Wolf said simply. Not after this. The bond between them, already strong through their shared battle against Horizon Financial, deepened with each discovered connection. Sarah learned that her fierce determination came not just from her adoptive parents, but from the Collins blood that ran through her veins. Wolf saw in Emma the echo of his own mother, Julie's grandmother, in her quick mind and quicker tongue. If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you're listening to in the comments. The news of their discovered relationship spread quickly through the ranks of the Pagans. What had begun as a mission of protection transformed into a family reunion that spanned the entire East Coast. Chapters that had sent representatives to support a stranger now celebrated the homecoming of their leader's long-lost niece. Sarah's immunotherapy treatment began the following Monday. The experimental protocol was grueling. Powerful drugs that would attempt to reprogram her immune system to recognize and attack the cancer cells that had spread throughout her body. The side effects were immediate and harsh. Fever, chills, nausea that left her weaker than the cancer itself. But this time, she didn't face it alone. Wolf arranged for Pagans with medical backgrounds to be present during her treatments. Red organized a schedule of support for Emma. Transportation to school and activities, help with homework, women to stay with her during Sarah's worst days. 3 weeks into the treatment, Dr. Patel called Sarah into his office. Wolf accompanied her, his large frame making the doctor's office seem suddenly small. The preliminary markers are encouraging, Dr. Patel said, reviewing her latest blood work. The tumor markers are decreasing, and the imaging shows some reduction in size of the largest masses. What does that mean? Sarah asked, hardly daring to hope. Is it working? Dr. Patel's expression was cautiously optimistic. It's too soon to use words like remission, but yes, your body is responding to the treatment. The immunotherapy is teaching your immune system to recognize the cancer cells. Sarah felt Wolf's hand close over hers, his calloused fingers gentle despite their strength. She had become accustomed to his presence, the unwavering support, the fierce protectiveness that now had the weight of blood behind it. When will we know for sure? Wolf asked. After the full 12-week protocol, Dr. Patel explained. But if these trends continue, he allowed himself a small smile. Let's just say I'm more optimistic than I was a month ago. Outside the clinic, Sarah leaned against Wolf's motorcycle, suddenly overwhelmed. I never thought I'd resigned myself to dying. Wolf finished when she couldn't. I know, but Collins women are fighters. Your mother fought until the end. You're fighting now, and you're not alone anymore. As autumn deepened into winter, the Pagans' presence in Maple Creek evolved. What had begun as an emergency response became a community fixture. The club purchased a small building at the edge of town, converting it into their local chapter house. Wolf officially transferred his leadership to the East Coast headquarters, establishing himself permanently in Maple Creek. The legal battle against Horizon Financial continued to expand. While Sarah's personal case was settled, the class action lawsuit grew to include over 40 families who had been targeted by predatory lending. Spider coordinated with a team of attorneys who took the case pro bono, inspired by the unlikely alliance between a dying mother and one of the country's most notorious motorcycle clubs. Media attention remained steady, with documentary filmmakers requesting permission to tell Sarah's story. She declined, preferring to keep her focus on her treatment and Emma, but she did agree to a single interview with a national news magazine on the condition that they highlight the broader issue of predatory lending rather than sensationalizing the pagans' involvement. People see the leather and the tattoos and think they know who these men and women are, Sarah told the interviewer, Wolf sitting stoically beside her. But they saved my life, my home, and my daughter's future when no one else would help. They're family in every sense of the word. The interview aired on a Sunday evening in December, when the first snow had dusted Maple Creek with white. Emma insisted they make it an event, inviting the core group of pagans who had been with them since the beginning to watch together. "Look at Mom on TV," Emma exclaimed, bouncing on the couch between Red and Valkyrie. "She looks so pretty." Sarah, still thin but no longer gaunt, her hair growing back in soft curls, smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm. The past months had been the hardest of her life physically, but somehow also the most supported. The constant fear that had been her companion since her diagnosis had receded, replaced by a cautious hope that grew stronger with each encouraging test result. If you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep? The day after the interview aired, Sarah's phone began ringing almost continuously. Other cancer patients reaching out for advice, families facing foreclosure, asking how to connect with legal help, motorcycle clubs from across the country offering support for similar cases in their communities. "You've started something," Red observed, as she helped Sarah sort through the messages. "Something bigger than Horizon Financial, or even the pagans." Sarah hadn't intended to become an advocate, but she found herself unable to turn away from those who saw in her story a reflection of their own struggles. With Red's help, she began connecting people with resources, legal aid organizations, cancer support groups, community assistance programs. Wolf watched this development with a mixture of pride and concern. "Don't overextend yourself," he cautioned one evening as Sarah sat at her kitchen table, responding to emails despite the obvious fatigue from her treatment earlier that day. "Your health comes first." "I know," Sarah assured him, "but helping others, it gives purpose to all this." Meaning. Wolf understood. The pagans had given his life meaning after he'd returned from combat, directionless and angry at a world that had taken his sister and separated him from his niece. The club had become his purpose, his family. Now Sarah was finding her own way to transform suffering into something meaningful. As Christmas approached, the question of Sarah's prognosis loomed larger. Her 12-week treatment protocol was nearing its end, with a comprehensive evaluation scheduled for the week before Christmas. The uncertainty created a strange tension in the household, hope battling with fear, anticipation mingled with dread. Emma, with a child's determination to create normalcy, insisted on elaborate holiday preparations. The small house was transformed with lights and decorations, many brought by pagans who arrived bearing armloads of tinsel and ornaments. A massive tree dominated the living room, its branches heavy with an eclectic mix of traditional baubles and handcrafted ornaments made by pagan members. "My dad used to say Christmas is for the living," Diesel remarked as he helped Emma hang a leather angel on the tree, a creation from the club's leatherworking class. "So, we're celebrating life, no matter what the doctors say next week." Sarah smiled, touched by the gruff biker's attempt at reassurance. "I like that thinking." The night before her final evaluation, Sarah couldn't sleep. She sat on her porch swing despite the cold, wrapped in a thick blanket emblazoned with the Pagans MC logo, a gift from the Women's Auxiliary. The street was quiet, though she knew at least 2 pagans were keeping watch nearby, as they had every night since they'd arrived 6 months ago. The squeak of the screen door announced Wolf's presence before she saw him. He settled his large frame beside her on the swing, which creaked in protest. "Big day tomorrow," he said simply. Sarah nodded, watching her breath form clouds in the cold air. "I'm scared, Wolf, not of dying exactly. I've made peace with that possibility, but of leaving Emma, of missing her life." Wolf was silent for a long moment. When I was in the worst parts of the war, my sergeant had a saying, "Plan for the worst, but live for the best." It got me through some dark places. "And if the worst happens?" Sarah asked quietly. "If the treatment hasn't worked? Then Emma will never wonder where she comes from or who her family is," Wolf said, his deep voice steady. "She'll grow up surrounded by hundreds of aunts and uncles who would die to protect her. She'll never doubt she was loved." He turned to look directly at Sarah. "But that's the contingency plan. Tomorrow, we're focusing on the best." The next morning, Sarah sat in Dr. Patel's office, Wolf again by her side. The doctor entered with a file folder and a carefully neutral expression that revealed nothing. "Sarah," he began, opening the folder, "we've completed a full evaluation. Blood work, imaging, tissue samples." He looked up, his professional demeanor softening slightly. "The results are remarkable. The primary tumors have reduced by more than 70%. The metastases in your lymph nodes are no longer detectable. Your body is responding to the immunotherapy in a way that, frankly, exceeds our most optimistic projections." Sarah heard the words, but couldn't quite process their meaning. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying that while it's too soon to use the word cured, you are in what we call a substantial partial remission. With continued treatment, there is now a real possibility of complete remission." Wolf's hand found hers, squeezing so hard it almost hurt, anchoring her as the room seemed to spin around her. "I might live." The question came out in a whisper. Dr. Patel smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Yes, Sarah, you might indeed live, and not just for months. We're now talking about years, potentially many years." The drive home passed in a blur. Sarah sat on the back of Wolf's motorcycle, the cold wind against her face, grounding her in a reality that had suddenly, drastically shifted. She had prepared for death, had organized her life around its inevitability. The prospect of a future, uncertain and fragile, but a future nonetheless, was almost too overwhelming to comprehend. Word had spread quickly through the pagan network. By the time they reached Sarah's street, dozens of motorcycles lined the approach to her house. Club members stood in her yard, breath fogging in the December air as they waited for news. Wolf cut the engine but remained seated, turning to help Sarah dismount. "Ready?" he asked quietly. Sarah nodded, removing her helmet. As she faced the gathered crowd, she felt a surge of emotion for these men and women who had become her family in the truest sense. Without them, she would have lost her home, her hope, and possibly the chance at treatment that was now giving her a second chance at life. "Well," Red called out, breaking the suspense, "what did the doctor say?" Sarah took a deep breath, feeling Wolf's solid presence behind her. "The treatment is working," she announced, her voice carrying in the cold air. "Dr. Patel says I'm in partial remission." The cheer that erupted was deafening. Bikers who had maintained tough exteriors for decades embraced openly, some wiping away tears without shame. Emma burst from the front door, where she had been waiting with Valkyrie, and launched herself into her mother's arms. I told you the magic medicine would work," Emma cried, her face buried against Sarah's chest. "You did, baby," Sarah agreed, holding her daughter tightly. "You never doubted." The celebration that followed was unlike anything Maple Creek had ever seen. The pagans transformed Sarah's modest home and yard into a festival of life, with food, music, and a bonfire that blazed well into the night. Neighbors who had once viewed the bikers with suspicion now joined the celebration, bringing dishes and congratulations. If you're enjoying the story, write from which city you are listening to in the comments. Late that evening, as the party continued around them, Wolf found Sarah sitting quietly by the fire, watching Emma teach a group of tough bikers the hand-clapping game she'd learned at school. "How are you really feeling?" he asked, settling beside her. Sarah considered the question. Grateful, overwhelmed, a little afraid to believe it's real. She turned to look at him. "I've been preparing to die for so long, I'm not sure I remember how to plan for living." Wolf nodded in understanding. One day at a time, that's all any of us can do. What happens now? Sarah asked. With the pagans, I mean. You all came here for a crisis that's no longer immediate. You think we're leaving? Wolf seemed surprised by the question. I wouldn't blame you. You have lives, responsibilities elsewhere. Wolf's weathered face softened. Sarah, you and Emma are family, not just to me, but to the club now. The pagans don't abandon family, especially not one who's fought as hard as you have. As if to emphasize his point, Doc approached with a leather vest draped over his arm. Unlike the usual Pagans MC vests, this one was sized for a woman, the leather soft and supple. From all of us, Doc said, presenting it to Sarah. Honorary member status, unanimous vote. Sarah accepted the vest with trembling hands, running her fingers over the patches. The main colors of the Pagans MC dominated the back, but beneath them was a unique addition, a cancer awareness ribbon intertwined with the words, Collins Strong. I don't know what to say, Sarah whispered. You don't have to say anything, Doc replied. Just wear it proud. As Sarah slipped the vest over her shoulders, the leather warm against the December chill, she felt a sense of belonging that transcended her illness, her struggles, even her newfound blood connection to Wolf. The pagans had come into her life as protectors, but had become something far more profound, a community that defined family by loyalty rather than convention. The settlement money from Horizon Financial arrived in January, just as Sarah began her maintenance therapy, a less intensive regimen designed to keep the cancer at bay while her body continued to heal. The sum was substantial, enough to pay off the medical bills that had accumulated before the settlement and to establish a trust for Emma's education. With Wolf's guidance, Sarah also set aside funds to establish a foundation, the Julie Collins Memorial Fund, dedicated to helping families facing both medical crises and housing insecurity. The irony that the money came from the very company that had nearly destroyed her wasn't lost on Sarah, but there was a poetic justice in using it to prevent others from facing the same predatory tactics. The class action lawsuit against Horizon Financial continued to wind through the courts, but the company's reputation had been irreparably damaged by the publicity surrounding Sarah's case. Their parent company, Cromwell Holdings, announced a reorganization that industry insiders recognized as damage control. James Mercer, the collections specialist who had threatened Sarah, was quietly dismissed. Winter gave way to spring, and Sarah's strength returned gradually. Her hair grew back darker and curlier than before. She gained weight, her face regaining the fullness that cancer had stolen. The weekly blood tests showed stable results. No evidence of disease activity, though Dr. Patel cautioned that monitoring would continue for years. Cancer like yours can be tricky, he explained during a checkup in March. It can hide, sometimes for years, but every month you remain stable increases the odds that the remission will be long-term. Sarah understood the uncertainty. It was a familiar companion now, though its character had changed from the certainty of death to the possibility of life. She had learned to live with it, to find joy in the present without constant fear of the future. Emma thrived amid the extended pagan family. The girl who had once been quiet and worried now bloomed with confidence, secure in the knowledge that she was surrounded by protectors. Her grades improved, she joined the soccer team, and she developed a particular interest in mechanics, spending hours in the garage with Diesel learning about engines. If you've watched this far, say in the comments, what secret do you keep? As the one-year anniversary of the Pagans' arrival in Maple Creek approached, Sarah stood in her backyard, surveying the transformation. The once neglected space now featured raised garden beds bursting with early vegetables, a repaired deck with fresh paint, and a small workshop where Wolf had been teaching Emma basic carpentry. The sound of motorcycles announced visitors, a familiar sound that no longer turned heads in the neighborhood. Red and Valkyrie dismounted in the driveway, carrying grocery bags for the weekly Sunday dinner that had become tradition. "The others will be here around 4, Red announced as she entered the kitchen. "Spider's bringing news about the class action suit." Sarah nodded, helping unpack the groceries. "Good news, I hope." "Sounds like it." The judge denied Horizon's motion to dismiss. "We're moving forward." As they prepared dinner together, a skill Sarah had relearned as her strength returned, Red studied her friend with a knowing eye. "You seem different today. Something on your mind?" Sarah hesitated, then smiled. "Dr. Patel said I can return to work part-time, not nursing yet. My immune system isn't strong enough for a hospital environment, but I've been offered a position coordinating patient advocacy at the cancer center." "Ooh, Sarah, that's wonderful," Red exclaimed, genuinely delighted. "When do you start?" "Next month, 3 days a week to begin with." Sarah kneaded bread dough with newfound vigor. "I never thought I'd work again, Red. I'd accepted that my career was over." "Life has a way of surprising us," Red mused. "A year ago, I would never have imagined spending my weekends in suburban Pennsylvania making dinner with a nurse who wears our colors." The two women laughed, the sound carrying through the open window to where Emma and Valkyrie were planting marigolds along the garden path. Wolf arrived later, his motorcycle accompanied by the distinctive rumble of dozens more. Sunday dinners at the Collins house had become something of a ritual for the local Pagans chapter, with anywhere from 20 to 50 members joining for food and fellowship. As the house and yard filled with leather-clad guests, Sarah found herself momentarily overwhelmed by the journey of the past year. From isolation and despair to community and hope, from terminal diagnosis to tentative remission, from impending homelessness to security, the transformation seemed almost unbelievable. "Penny for your thoughts," Wolf said, joining her on the porch steps as the sun began to set. "Just grateful," Sarah replied, "for all of this. For you finding me, even if it took a near disaster to make it happen." Wolf nodded, his gaze fixed on Emma, who was proudly showing off her garden to several tough-looking bikers who were giving her their complete attention. "Julie would be proud of you, of the mother you've become, the fighter you are." "I wish she could have known, Emma," Sarah said softly. "She knows," Wolf assured her. "Somehow she knows." The evening progressed with food and stories, laughter and occasional tears, as Pagans shared memories of their own journeys. Spider arrived with news that the class action suit was gaining strength, with former Horizon employees coming forward as witnesses to the company's predatory practices. As darkness fell, Wolf called for attention, his commanding presence immediately quieting the gathered crowd. "A year ago," he began, his deep voice carrying across the yard, "a woman none of us knew called asking for help. She faced losing her home while fighting terminal cancer, trying to secure a future for her daughter." He paused, looking around at the assembled Pagans. "What happened next changed all our lives." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. The Pagans MC has always stood for brotherhood, for loyalty, for standing against those who would prey on the vulnerable. But Sarah and Emma Collins taught us something new, that family can be found in unexpected places, that courage wears many faces, and that sometimes the fiercest fighters are those who never sought battle. Wolf turned to Sarah, who stood on the porch steps with Emma beside her, both wearing their custom leather vests. 1 year ago today, 2,000 Pagans answered a call to protect a mother and daughter. Today, we celebrate not just their survival, but their place in our family. From behind his back, Wolf produced a small wooden box, carved with the Pagans emblem and the Collins family crest he had researched through military archives. "Sarah and Emma Collins, this represents your permanent place in our history, our present and our future." Inside the box lay 2 medallions, similar to those worn by lifetime members of the club, but modified to include the cancer ribbon that had become part of Sarah's journey. "With these," Wolf continued, his voice rough with emotion, "we recognize that blood is thicker than water, but loyalty is thicker than blood. The Pagans MC will stand with you for as long as we exist." As Sarah and Emma accepted the medallions, the gathered Pagans erupted in applause and cheers. The noise was so loud that at first no one noticed the black SUV that pulled up in front of the house, or the man in an expensive suit who emerged from it. It was Red who spotted him first, her hand moving instinctively to where she would normally carry a weapon. "Wolf," she said quietly, nodding toward the street. The celebration quieted as the man approached the yard gate. Sarah recognized him immediately. James Mercer, the Horizon Financial Collections specialist who had threatened her a year ago. Wolf moved protectively in front of Sarah and Emma, his massive frame blocking them from Mercer's view. "You're not welcome here," he stated flatly. Mercer raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here officially. Horizon fired me 3 months ago." His voice lacked the arrogance Sarah remembered. "I came to apologize." A murmur ran through the gathered pagans, skepticism clear in their posture and expressions. "Apologize." Sarah stepped around Wolf, facing Mercer directly. "After everything you did?" Mercer had the grace to look ashamed. "What I did was wrong. Not just to you, but to dozens of families. I followed orders, told myself it was just business." He swallowed hard. "Then my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer last month." The revelation hung in the air, the irony not lost on anyone present. "Suddenly I understood what it means to face losing everything, your health, your home, your future," Mercer continued. "I couldn't sleep, couldn't look at myself in the mirror knowing what I'd done to people in your situation." Sarah studied the man before her, noting the shadows under his eyes, the haunted look she recognized all too well. "Why come here? Why now?" "Because I'm testifying in the class action suit," Mercer replied. "I'm bringing evidence, internal memos, recorded conversations, documentation of the systematic targeting of vulnerable homeowners. Spider can confirm. I met with him yesterday." All eyes turned to Spider, who nodded once. "He's telling the truth. His testimony could break the case wide open." Mercer looked directly at Sarah, genuine remorse in his eyes. "I can't undo what I did to you and the others, but I can help make sure it never happens again." The yard fell silent as everyone waited for Sarah's response. A year ago she might have turned away, too hurt and angry to accept his apology, but her journey had taught her about second chances, about the possibility of transformation. "How is your wife?" she asked softly. Mercer seemed surprised by the question. "Fighting? It's early stages, but the treatments are brutal." Sarah nodded in understanding. "If she needs someone to talk to, someone who's been through it." She left the offer hanging. "Thank you," Mercer said, his voice thick. "That's more kindness than I deserve." "It's not about what any of us deserve," Sarah replied. "It's about who we choose to become." As Mercer left, the celebration resumed, though with a more reflective tone. The encounter had been a poignant reminder of how much had changed in a year, not just for Sarah and the pagans, but for all those touched by their unlikely alliance. Later that night, as the guests departed and the house grew quiet, Sarah sat on the porch with Wolf, watching the stars appear in the spring sky. "Did you mean what you said to Mercer?" Wolf asked. "About helping his wife?" Sarah nodded. "I did. Cancer is a lonely journey, even with support. And I've learned something this year about the power of unexpected allies." Wolf smiled, the expression softening his weathered face. "Julie would have said the same thing. You're more like her than you know." "Tell me more about her," Sarah requested. "About my mother." And as the night deepened around them, Wolf shared stories of the sister he had lost and found again through her daughter, of the family legacy that lived on in Sarah and Emma, and of the unbreakable bonds that had formed when 2,000 members of the Pagans MC had answered a single mother's desperate plea for protection. In the quiet neighborhood of Maple Creek, surrounded by the unlikely family fate had provided, Sarah Collins watched the future unfold before her, uncertain but filled with possibility, challenging but faced together. The cancer might return someday. The battle with corporations like Horizon would continue, life would bring new struggles, but she would never again face them alone. The medallion Wolf had given her caught the moonlight as she turned it in her fingers, a tangible symbol of the protection that had saved not just her home, but her life. 2,000 pagans had stood guard when she needed them most, and in doing so had changed not just her story, but their own.